Hey, everybody, welcome into episode 141 of the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. And I'll tell you what, I have got a good one for you today. Today on the show, I have Dr. Andrea Gilbert joining me, and I'll tell you a little bit more about her in just a second. But here's what I want to share just right off the top. And I talk about it a little bit in the actual episode. But Dr. Gilbert and I have been doing some work together for the last couple of years. She reached out to me about 2 years ago, talking about an idea she had to really lean into, to pour into the classified staff in Converse County School District number 1, which is in Douglas, Wyoming. She is the assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum and instruction in that particular district. And she wanted to really give them the opportunity to grow and to learn and to develop just as much as what we typically do with our certified staff. I asked Dr. Gilbert to come on the show and share with all of my listeners her insights and her perspectives, not only around this particular work. And I'll be honest with you, I'm really stoked about the work that I've had the opportunity to be a part of there in Douglas for the last 2 years. The growth and just the ownership that the classified staff have taken in that district is absolutely mind-blowing. But anyway, I asked Dr. Gilbert to come on and talk a little bit about that, but also to talk about just the overall perspective that she has and the work and the direction that she goes about to lay out a professional development plan. Because I'll tell you this, having worked with her for a couple of years and worked with a lot of other people around the country, she is as systematic and forward-thinking as anybody that I've had the honor to work with. So this is a really cool conversation. I told you I'd tell you a little bit about her. I've already told you some, but know this. Dr. Andrea Gilbert is a leader. She's a learner. She's an educator, and she's a blogger. She's very passionate about growing lifelong learning within her education corral. She has been awarded several honors, including being the Wyoming Sallie Mae Teacher of the Year, and recently was named the Wyoming Curriculum Director of the Year. She also is a part of, and I didn't know this, honestly, folks, until we started the recording. She is a part of 2 National Intercollegiate Rodeo Association national championship teams at the University of Wyoming, which I think is awesome. Go Pokes, right? And Dr. Gilbert believes that education is a lifelong experience that we foster in each individual within our sphere of influence. Again, folks, like I said, this is a truly awesome conversation, and I know that you are going to love it. And let's just get right to it. Here we go with Leaning Into Leadership. All right, folks, welcome into this week's episode. If you're watching on video, you'll notice that I am rocking my Wyoming polo shirt. Of course, as always, over my left shoulder is my Wyoming pennant, because at heart, I'm a Wyoming kid. I grew up in central Wyoming. I was a principal in Wyoming. I went to the University of Wyoming twice. So what better way to lead in to our conversation today with Dr. Andrea Gilbert, who is an assistant superintendent in central Wyoming, in Converse County, Douglas, Wyoming. Dr. Gilbert, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super stoked about this conversation. Folks, let me just give you a little bit of, full transparency. For the last, I'd say, year and a half, maybe a little bit more than that, along with my sometimes partner in crime, Mr. Tom Cody, I have been doing some work with Dr. Gilbert and Converse County School District 1 in Douglas. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of that work today. But again, and every time I'm in Douglas, I say it to everybody there that it's just so wonderful to be back to my roots. So we'll probably talk a little bit of Wyoming while we're at it. But before we dive into all of that, 100%. So before we dive into that, just real quick, Andrea, share with my listeners a little bit about who you are. I mean, jump in the time machine, go back as far as you'd like, and just kind of, give us a roadmap to what puts you in the chair you're in today.
All right. Well, it's been an interesting journey, actually. I have literally been a custodian in a school all the way to the assistant superintendent. And I do have you beat, Darrin, because I have 3 degrees from the University of Wyoming.
Oh, there you go. You do have me beat.
Right?
You do have me
right?
beat. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually come from a family of educators. My mom was an educator. My grandma was an educator. I was a custodian in high school, worked in the summers in the school, came to the University of Wyoming on a rodeo scholarship. So I actually got to go to school because of my rodeo and then became a teacher in Wyoming for 7 years. And then had I always say, the fortune of having a traumatic brain injury. So my horse fell and caused an injury, which kind of changed the trajectory of my life. So I moved from the classroom to technology and was a tech director for 12 years, then a principal, and then assistant superintendent.
Wow. That is a really, really interesting journey. And um,
Yeah.
several things that certainly I did not know. Um, I, I think I knew that you had two, but I didn't know you had 3 degrees from the University of Wyoming.
I
Um,
do.
yeah. So you're one of those few who, like me, can say that you have 3 degrees, all from universities above 7,000 feet. My master's is from
Correct.
Northern Arizona in Flagstaff, which sits right
Yep.
at 7,000 feet. So there you go. Yeah, so there's some completely worthless trivia for you folks. The University of Wyoming sits a little over 7,200 feet, 7,220 to be precise. Northern Arizona sitting right at 7,000. But we're not talking lumberjacks today. We're talking Wyoming cowboys, and we're talking specifically today, Andrea. What I really want to dive into today is the work that you do out of your position specific to professional learning. At the time that this episode is coming out, many of our listeners, as building level principals, as district level administrators, superintendents, they're thinking a lot about their professional development planning for the coming year or even further. I know you're one who is, you've long since planned. Next year, you're a year out usually with your professional development planning. But
Mhm.
I want to get into the process, the what you look for, what are some of kind of those key indicators to identify the needs of our staff. So we're not just throwing blanket items out there. And then eventually we're going to talk about some work you're doing with your classified staff, which I think is absolutely groundbreaking. But let's do this. Let me ask the question this way. When you are going about the process of leading the plan for professional growth in your district, what does that look like? Who's involved? How do you look at that whole picture and start to dial in on what really matters?
Well, as far as who's involved, really everyone's involved, which can get messy sometimes. But the way we keep tight is over my shoulder, you see our instructional cycle: define learning, assessment, evidence, instructional response. So we have kept it tight, tight, tight to that for the last 6 years. Uh, when I say everyone's involved, we really, as an instructional leadership team, make a decision about where are we going next? What is the learning we're going to do to support that? And we listen to the staff. So we survey the staff a lot. We ask leadership teams. The instructional team brings that back to me, and we kind of plan that out. And we do that on the classified side as well. So, for example, last operations team meeting, we brainstormed, okay, how do we take this learning we've been doing and continue it into next year? And what are the themes for that classified side? So we're really tight with that. And we do not, as you know, uh, very rarely do we do a one and done. If we do, it's for a specific purpose. Like we want to bring in somebody to really motivate and start the year. That might be a one and done, but it's tied to the theme that we're going to carry through that year, if that makes sense. Um, so we just try to keep it tight, keep it going, and keep that staff inspired.
So as you're going through the process, I love that. I love that you guys have the instructional model that you have and that you continue to go back to that. I think one of the most important pieces, I push this with leadership teams all the time. If you can't be clear about what really matters, it's impossible to hit the target. And with you, you have a very clear target. You have a very clear filter through which, as a team, you're going to make decisions.
Mhm.
as you move from year to year, as you continue through the cycle, take us maybe a little bit further into, I don't know, maybe what some of those discussions look like, or what are some of the key pieces of information you're looking at when you're deciding, how is this particular piece working and how do we continue to build on it?
Yeah. So we've learned some lessons along the way. For example, as we started that define learning work, that work just in that one silo of our cycle took a couple of years to define what we kids want kids to know and do. And what's unique about this district is kids transition to a new school every 2 years. We have a K1 building, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12. Those were very site-based buildings. So over the last 6 and 7 years, we've been trying to become more of a system on how we do business. And so we think about how do we feed that system for success? Because a K1 building may have very different needs from a 9-12 building. So we started with working with Marzano resources to understand how to do proficiency scales, how to set priority standards, how do we even define what we want kids to know and be able to do, and what does that look like? And so they came and worked with us we had them for 3 years. So some lessons we learned along the way doing that work. We stayed tight to that instructional cycle. Sometimes staff felt like they weren't learning anything new. When we knew at the leadership level, we were learning the next thing they needed to know. But because we had the same trainers and we kept that tight, so we've learned we need to communicate the why behind that more succinctly so that staff sees that end game and where that's
Makes a
going,
lot of
where that's
sense.
leading.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you hit a couple of things in there that really, I guess, lit my brain on fire. And one of the ones that you said that might get glossed over, and I want to come back to it and maybe go a little bit deeper. You said kind of at the outset about, you're not really doing the one and done anymore. Maybe you bring somebody for some motivation, but you're not into the one and done anymore. But then you followed that up with having the same trainers over and over and over. I think that's one of the most important pieces with that professional growth cycle is not just having the same person. It's about building that relationship, the trust that's with that person,
Yeah.
and that person getting to know your people, right? Talk a little
Yep.
bit more about that.
That makes a very big difference because when those trainers are coming and establishing those relationships, what happens is they know the work we're doing and they know where we need to go next. And it helps create that continuum and that growth. I think we forget that adult learners basically learn the same way as kids do in many ways. There are differences, but sometimes you don't hear it the first time. Sometimes you're ready to hear the next thing or to hear that thing again the next time because you've practiced it. And that's, I think, the key piece to the professional learning we've done the last 2 years is there's an intentional practice piece to it. So we do a professional learning day, and then they work in collaborative teams to practice that learning. And then that trainer comes back and comes during that learning cycle and gives feedback, helps them answer questions, provides that support for implementation. And so it's an always evolving cycle, and it's always growing with the staff as they need it to grow.
I think a question that probably a lot of people are saying, oh man, I want to know, what does your PD calendar look like? So folks, I'll ask the question for you because I know you want to know. And doing the work that I do with schools all across the country, I mean, I see people who have like 2 PD days in a year, and I see some who have like 20. And I know you're kind of somewhere in between there. Talk a little bit about that professional development calendar and what that looks like.
Yep, we run a modified calendar. So as you know, in Wyoming, you can submit for an alternative school calendar as long as you meet the minimum hours. So we really intentionally we have 4 professional learning days to start the year, and then we have a professional learning day almost every month. We try to stay away from November and December for obvious reasons, and April, which is testing season. But we try to have a professional learning day every month, and that's for classified and certified.
And I think that right there, that is huge. And folks, I'll be honest with you, the number one reason I wanted to have Andrea come on and have this conversation with me is for the work that Converse County One is doing with their classified staff. So we'll go back maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, when you reached out to me and to Tom Cody and said, "Hey, we'd like to talk to you about coming and doing some work with our district." And Tom and I at the time had been doing work with a lot of teachers in a lot of different places. And your request was a little bit different. It was, "We want you to come work with our classified staff." But I will tell you this, and I'm sure some of you are like, "Really? Work with the classified staff?" Tom and I couldn't have been more excited about this, because that's a group that typically does not get the love that they're getting in your district. So where did the thought come from? I know a little bit of this, but I want you to go ahead and maybe tell the story of how that came about. And then let's push into the work that you're doing to grow your classified staff intentionally.
Absolutely. Well, coming out of COVID, as you know, all schools got the ESSER funds, which were a tremendous boost for our schools. We're very fortunate in Wyoming. We have a lot of stuff. We have the tools we need to teach. We need the professional learning to use those tools effectively. So as we were kind of pondering the best use of that funding, one idea I had, and I would also say I got a very large literacy grant, with the intent of, I believe in my heart of hearts, that what makes a difference in student learning is the quality of the teacher in front of them. And if you look at a school system, what makes a difference in the culture is every single person in that culture. So we have as many classified staff as we do certified staff. So I had this wild idea to do what's called a professional learning incentive. So at that time, we were doing a lot of professional learning, but we hadn't really created a culture where staff craved professional learning. And so my mantra is, we should all learn because we deserve it. We deserve to be learners. We deserve to learn new things. And so I had this idea to, instead of buying more stuff, to incentivize staff to really develop that professional learning mindset. So they would do learning, but then apply that learning in a way that created the excitement for it. And that would be the incentive. So they would do a professional learning day or two. So in this case, we do 2 professional learning days, and then they do a learning cycle. And I wanted to give them choice in what they studied and how they did that cycle so that they owned it. And then at the end of that cycle, they get a $500 incentive that goes into their salary. So that counts not only it's not a bonus, it actually goes in their salary. So it also counts on their retirement. And we give them graduate credit, so it counts towards a permanent salary raise if they accumulate enough of those. So we've paid out about $1.5 million to classified and certified staff. We created that incentive for every single person in our organization, all the way up to the superintendent. And they choose how to do that learning through a team cycle, where they work with a team of people, through peer coaching, where 2 people work together, or through an impact cycle with a coach, where they really formally study data and work with a coach. So no learning occurred in isolation. And that really speaks to our mission statement of working together to achieve excellence. And our vision statement is life ready. And that's just not life ready students, that's life ready staff as well.
I just love that so much. It's so powerful to see the investment in all of the adults, not just the teachers. Not that we shouldn't invest in teachers, but like as you said it extremely well. And folks, pay attention to this. You probably never realized it, but it's true in almost every single district. You have an equal number of classified staff that you have certified staff. And we really need to be investing in the classified staff equally with our certified staff. So let's talk a little bit about some of the work with the classified staff, some of what you and your directors led, what are some of the results that you saw, some of the really cool things that happened as a result of this project.
Absolutely. So we kind of approach the classified staff from two different silos. First, to provide them opportunity to be really good at their work, so process work. And we used APQC to help drive that work, to really understand how do they engage in the work they do. So kind of our theme through all this was that engagement. And then we also thought about how do we build that culture? How do we help classified staff understand the incredibly important role they play in our culture and impacting the lives of our students? And that's where we reached out to, of course, the expert at that, Darrin Peppard.
Okay.
And helping them to understand that every interaction they have with a student may be the best one that student had that day. Think about a bus driver. I always think when I'm a principal, of course we did retirements for teachers, but my kids, it kind of tears me up, fell apart when one of my bus drivers retired.
Yeah.
Because he had driven the bus for over 25 years. Those kids, that was the first person they saw every day and the last person they saw every night. And they adored him. And he was the one constant K-12 for that group of students. So think about that. If you live somewhere, you see that bus driver every single day of your school career. You see your teacher for 1 year. And so you don't realize what an impact that is. Or for our lunch ladies, they may be given the only meal that kid has that day. Or just giving them the one smile they had if they've been a little naughty that day, So custodians see the kids and interact with them all the time. I think the middle school custodians really purposely through this project try to engage the kids in the school. It is now the biggest thing for those kids to go help them do the black marks in the hallway, and how it's changed how the kids take care of that school is amazing. So it's just been so fun to watch that classified staff really bloom and understand the importance of their work in helping the lives of every single student in our organization.
Yeah, absolutely. That, of course, the first time that Tom and I were there, it was, we did kind of a keynote that we built specially for you guys, and then did some breakout sessions and that kind of stuff, and everybody had some fun and had some laughter. Of course, folks, if you've ever heard Tom Cody speak, you know that he is basically a stand-up comedian that just happens to have really great educational content. But there were so many great things that came out of that. But it was that second visit earlier this year when Tom and I were there that so much of the just celebrating what had been happening. And it was more of them sharing. And there's just so many powerful stories that really stand out to me. I know you have found quite a few different ways to celebrate not just the classified, but also the certified staff. But that particular day, we were celebrating like crazy the classified staff and some of the cool things that they had had taken place, or steps that they had taken. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the middle school custodians, the one of your HVAC employees, taking a kid under his wing and kind of, helping to support him, the crossing guard who, saw a kid without a coat, went and bought her a coat, and just some of those types of things. Talk a little bit about, if you want to share a couple of stories, that'd be awesome, but also talk a little bit about how you've celebrated the learning, the success of the whole group, not necessarily just the classified.
So we just got done with a great big celebration on April 29th. Everybody got a t-shirt. Everybody's wearing them with pride. And we really celebrated the last 2 years the growth of the district. So we did a big video. We recognized every single department and the learning that they did. We played it for the whole staff. Some stories that have come out of this work, especially on the classified side, transportation has spent truly devoted 2 years to a PBIS model in recognizing when kids do good. And in the first year alone, they have really committed to finding kids doing good every day on their buses, and they have reduced discipline referrals by 42% in the first year. And I
Amazing.
bet it's even more at the end of this year. Yeah. And I think just for them to enjoy the kids, to look for the good, it's just been fun. And it's fun to feel that energy that they have. The crossing guard story. So, crossing guards aren't paid a fortune. And a little girl was coming to school at the high school and didn't have a coat. And for those of you who aren't in Wyoming, if you don't have a coat for about 9 months out of the year, it's a dire situation.
It is. It's
And
brutal.
yes, and that crossing guard left work that day and went down and bought that kid a coat and brought it back. And I just thought that was the coolest story. Our tech team, this year they've done gratitude tickets. So when they go out and do tech tickets, if they see something that they want to thank somebody for, they leave a little note for them. And it is really cool. I even got one, and that was pretty fun because I love working with that crew.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
every single department and every single building has really leaned into we own the culture in our building. We can be leaders in that. And I think that's been the most important message that you and Tom shared is that they can lead. Just because they're classified staff doesn't mean they can't lead what we do in our district.
That just, man, I know those stories, and yet it still gets me every single time. And yeah, I know several times I've said to them, every adult has the opportunity to make a positive difference in the life of a kid, and hearing them go and do those things. Listening to your transportation team talk about not just the PBIS incentives and the way that they've taken that on, but the way that they have shifted their mindset, the way that, even, when they're in, in the bus barn, sitting at the table and that kind of stuff,
Yes.
using some of the language like, hey, honor the absent, straight out of Tom's mouth, right into the bus barn. Just hearing some of those things, what it really reinforces is how truly valued as employees they feel in your school district, not just because of this particular process that you've put together, but it's a huge part of it. And so, huge congratulations on all the work that you and the entire team have done in Commerce
Yes.
One. It's really, really remarkable to see, and it's exciting. I'm just honestly, I'm just a little bit, I don't know. I'm honored that I got to be a little piece of it. So certainly some great stuff. Before we transition to the last question I ask everybody, I guess I just want to go back just a little bit more, and maybe if there's something that we haven't hit about professional learning, both in your district and then just maybe your philosophy on professional learning. What might be one more thing that you'd want to share?
I think you have to find a way to make it personal. So there's always an opportunity to create choice for staff. So it's not a choice that we're going to learn around our instructional cycle, but we can give staff ownership in how they do that learning and what pieces of that learning they're really going to focus on. I kind of think of it, I think we think of systems wrong. And here's what I mean by that. We spend a lot of time in education trying to make everybody good at everything. If we're a leader, we should be good at relationships, good at managing our budget, good at getting our emails done, good at this, good at that, instead of leveraging people's strengths. And there's so much research about if you focus on what you're good at and get even better at it, how much impact that can have. And I think if we thought about systems differently, for example, I think of two leaders I have. One is an amazing literacy leader and one's amazing at relationships. They're both good at the other thing too. But if we were to pair those two together and imagine the impact that would have. But in education, we kind of try to expect everybody to be good at everything and stick in and stay in their building, stay in their classroom, instead of trying to leverage this all together. And so that's what I tried to do with the professional learning, is to allow them that choice to really buy into something, to pick something that they really wanted to be great at, and create a learning cycle around that where they were working with their teams and helping leverage each other's strengths to become great.
That's outstanding. Absolutely love that. That's a very different way of thinking about systems, and a very, very smart way of thinking about systems. So, Dr. Gilbert, this is the Leaning into Leadership podcast. So we always wrap up by asking the same question of everybody that is here as a guest. So you've shared a lot of ways that you're leaning into leadership, but what might be another way that you're leaning into leadership right now?
I try to think about it this way, like you don't grow from learning, you grow from reflecting on learning. So I try to always reflect and think about how I can do things better. So I think I'm pretty good at looking at that 10,000 foot view. Probably my biggest weakness is how do I communicate that 10,000 foot view out? And so I'm always trying to learn and grow and understand other people's points of view and how we can communicate where we're going and what we're doing. And it's just an always evolving journey for me. And I hope I leave a legacy where everybody felt like I supported them to be the best person they could be.
Love it. That is outstanding. So people are going to want to reach out. They're going to want to get in touch with you, find out a little bit more, maybe about the work that you guys have done. How do my listeners find you?
So they can, probably the best way, I'm kind of in that ground where I'm on the way to retirement, but educationcorral@gmail.com is probably the best way to reach out.
Perfect. I will make sure that is down in the show notes so everybody can reach out. Dr. Andrea Gilbert, thank you so much for joining me here on the Leaning into Leadership podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been fun working with you. Hey, everybody, you need to have Darrin come to your district. It makes a difference.
Thank you. I love that. Okay, tell me that is not everything that I promised that it would be. What an amazing conversation. I really enjoyed my time with Dr. Andrea Gilbert. Look forward to continuing to work with her and Converse County School District number 1 there in Douglas, Wyoming, and to just continue to see the incredible things that are happening in that particular district. And I'm thrilled that she came on and shared that, because hopefully you took away something that you could say, hey, you know what, I could do that, or she's right, I do need to pour into my classified staff just as much as I pour into my certified staff. What an amazing perspective she brought. So I can't stop gushing about this particular episode. But with that, it is time for a pep talk. This week's pep talk, honestly, folks, we're heading into Memorial Day weekend, or we're at Memorial Day weekend. And many of you, your school years have ended, right? The plane is on the ground, the passengers have left, and now it's time to just take a deep breath. For some of you, maybe you still have a few days left, and I know my friends in New York, you still have almost an entire month. But nonetheless, we're at a point in time when I think it really makes a lot of sense to get up on the balcony and say thank you. Identify 2 or 3 people who really made a difference for you this year. 2 or 3 people who poured into you, or who just asked you the right question at the right time. You know what I'm talking about, right? Those people that when you were really having a tough day, or you were really struggling to make a decision, that just asked the right questions. And it might have even just been, are you okay? Or have you considered it from this angle? Those people who support us, the supportive panda, as my friend Tom Cody likes to call it, are the ones who help us make it successfully through those school years. So This week, my challenge for you is simple. Find, identify, reach out, and say thank you to those people, because we don't navigate successfully our school years and make the impact that we make without those who are around us. That's what I got for you this week, folks. Have an absolutely incredible holiday weekend and have a Road to Awesome week.